With today's review of Teen Titans, the episode The Beast Within, we're actually starting to creep up on the end of Teen Titans Season 3. It really feels like we're blowing right through this show. And despite the long hiatus that I took recently in between reviews, I do think it is worth mentioning at this point, now that I am starting to feel that it has been a treat going back to rewatch all of these episodes. And I cannot wait to get to Seasons 4 and 5, because I haven't been exposed to those nearly as much as I have the first three. It's going to be a lot of fun revisiting them. That said, I find The Beast Within to be an episode which is more interesting for its implications and for what it could have been than for what it actually is on the surface. And I'll talk about that as the review goes on. The episode opens on all of the Titans somehow getting their butts handed to them by this Adonis guy, who's basically Gaston in power armor. And yeah, you can kind of spin it that they're holding back a bit since they seem to be in some kind of animal testing facility and probably don't want to damage the equipment or harm the animals, whereas Adonis himself doesn't give a crap about any of that and is willing to cut loose. But that doesn't change the fact that I really don't think they should be having this much trouble with a guy whose only power is that he's robot strong, when Cyborg is also robot strong, and Starfire is arguably stronger than him, and Raven is there. In particular, Raven doesn't really show well during this fight. In fact, she gets pinned by this guy super easily, giving him a chance to creep on her hard.
Go! You're feisty.
Oh hey, I see that she remembered that she can teleport. That's good, at least. So why not just teleport Adonis right to jail? Isn't that a thing you can do too? So, when Beast Boy really cuts loose against Adonis after being dissed by him, cycling through his different animal forms very rapidly, making admittedly really good use of his power set, the same way that we've seen him do before when he really cuts loose during a fight. I'm not as impressed as I should be, because frankly he shouldn't have needed to do this to defeat this guy. But he still does cut loose, he still does solo defeat a guy who was putting all of the Titans through their paces just a couple of minutes ago. But he also accidentally breaks open some chemical containers and splatters a green goo all over himself and Adonis. I wonder if this is a different green goo than all the other green goo in this show. I imagine it probably is. It's hard to tell though, there's so much green goo in this show. Like there's literally a villain made partially of green goo. Adonis is defeated though, and he's carted off to super jail or whatever. And the Titans return home, but after they do, we're greeted with sort of a montage of scenes of Beast Boy acting really aggressive towards his friends and just being kind of a dick, but a different kind of dick than Adonis was. The implication between the way that Adonis carried himself and the fact that he had that expensive robot suit is that Adonis is supposed to be a rich boy, entitled alpha male type, and the implication also seemed to be that somehow got passed on to Beast Boy, since as he's leaving the lab, one of the dogs in one of the kennels submits to him without him even so much as looking at it. Clearly, the intention was for us to assume that somehow the chemical caused Adonis's alpha male behavior to rub off on Beast Boy. But already, the way that he's acting is enough different from the way that Adonis was reacting that already doesn't really line up. And then there's something later on in the episode that implies that whatever happened must have in some way come from Beast Boy and been transferred to Adonis, but I'll again talk about that later in the review. The explanation for exactly what happens to Beast Boy in this episode is just really weird, and I don't understand what they were trying to do with it, because it doesn't really make logical sense even in universe. But anyway, Beast Boy's being a dick. He's clearly submitting to his animal side more than he used to, We see him working out to take out his frustration, turning into animals in order to perform more effectively, which makes me wonder if he gets like his gorilla form, like super jacked, and then turns back into his human form. Is his human form gonna be more muscular too? Like, I don't think that's really a question that I need answered, but I definitely want it answered. He also, the first night back in the tower after this fight with Adonis, wakes up on the floor, really enjoyed it. Then he smells something in the kitchen and reacts very strongly to this scent, the way that an animal would. Goes out and finds Robin making his breakfast, and then he eats the breakfast despite the fact that it consists of meat and eggs, and Beast Boy doesn't eat those things. Things do finally come to a head, though, when he almost really gets into it with Raven, and the other Titans have to step in. He goes back to his room, starts to get really emotional about stuff, and then starts to transform differently than his normal transformations as it tears up his clothes during the process. Normally his clothes are just, I guess, absorbed into his animal form, a la D&D rules. But here, you can clearly see his clothes ripping and tearing as his body gets larger. This is obviously something different. And then we cut to Raven screaming about something, and then the other Titans finding scratch marks all over the place, and Raven and Beast Boy are gone. And we are at this point obviously supposed to assume that Beast Boy turned into something, which then attacked Raven because he was recently angry with Raven. The Titans, though, rightfully so, think that both of them have been taken by someone or something, and go out to look for them, splitting up to look for clues. They eventually follow them into the sewer, track them down, and find Beast Boy in a sort of were-creature form, holding Raven in his mouth by her cape. They do not yet realize that this is Beast Boy. They think that this is the thing that took the two of them, and Raven is very, very unconscious at this point. It really does seem like Beast Boy hurt her. So when the Titans beat the crap out of him and he turns back into Beast Boy, they're of course pretty surprised by what they have found. They take him back to the tower and determine that Raven is in some sort of healing coma thing, like psychically induced healing coma thing. And Robin starts to really grill Beast Boy. It takes him a while to accept that apparently he hurt Raven, because he's sure that whether they fought or not, no matter what, he would not have done that to her. But Robin seems content to not only dismiss that, but treat Beast Boy as a criminal by default, unless he can offer a plausible alternative explanation as to what happened, which I don't think that's how the law works. They didn't actually see Beast Boy harming Raven in any way, but this gets Beast Boy worked up again, and it seems that his transformations are hulkish in nature, as when he gets angry, he turns into the were-creature again, and he seems very single-mindedly focused at getting to Raven, fighting through the other Teen Titans in order to do so, until he's eventually driven off by Starfire's Starbolts. And this does seem to corroborate the idea that he's trying to seriously hurt Raven. But it is as they are chasing Beast Boy down, trying to recapture him, that Raven wakes up, and Starfire is still there, looking after her. So she has someone to exposit to about the fact that Beast Boy wasn't trying to hurt her, he was trying to save her. And this is when, as Beast Boy is being cornered by Robin and Cyborg, another were-creature comes up behind them and attacks them, and Beast Boy engages it in battle. It's a really cool fight, despite the fact these creatures look very much the same and have the same power set. They do a really good job of making the fight dynamic anyway. Beast Boy is very impressive here, and he does win against the other creature. I never expected that he wouldn't. He has far more experience fighting in animalistic forms than, it turns out, Adonis. Because it turns out, we learned this a little bit earlier from some exposition from Cyborg, it turns out that that green goo caused them to mutate into these were-creatures, which doesn't make sense in Adonis's case at all. Because the implication is Beast Boy turned into this thing when exposed to the chemical, because his DNA is already unstable. him being a shapeshifter. Adonis is not a shapeshifter. I guess it's possible that some of Beast Boy's DNA got onto Adonis or got into the chemical and then backwashed via the chemical onto Adonis and gave him just enough of Beast Boy's powers that he was also mutated in the same way. But it's a stretch. Like, I know for the story they were trying to tell that Beast Boy in this more instinctually driven form was protecting Raven in a very overly aggressive, animalistic way. That to tell that story, they needed a villain for Beast Boy to fight at the end. But, like, this could have been bettered just by Adonis's wear form being more, I don't know, apish than Beast Boy's or something, to imply that Beast Boy's form came from all of the animal traits within him, the animal traits that he can call upon, so that's why it's sort of a more of a hybridized looking thing, whereas Adonis just becomes a bigger, badder ape. Like, there wasn't even a mistaken identity thing in the episode. There wasn't a time when they saw Adonis doing something really bad and thought it was Beast Boy that necessitated him being in this form, that necessitated him looking so much like Beast Boy's wear form. But in the end, it doesn't really matter, because it's that really good fight between the two of them and the ending of the episode which really give this episode any value, in my opinion. We learn that Adonis, in his wear form, came into the tower, apparently looking for Beast Boy, and bumped into Raven, attacking her, and that if Beast Boy hadn't attacked him back, also in his wear form, and taken Raven away to protect her, she'd probably be dead right now. And so they have a really touching scene at the end, which I am 100% sure really solidified the Raven Beast Boy ship in the eyes of the fandom, because they have a lot of chemistry in this scene, where Beast Boy is lamenting the fact that despite the fact that he's been cured at this point of the involuntary transformations, he can still feel the Werebeast within him. But Raven reassures him that without the Werebeast, she'd be dead, that as the Werebeast, he still obviously cared about his friends, he wasn't like a bad person, and that having that within him doesn't make him bad, it just means he has to learn when to let it out, and by extension, the implication is that he should probably learn to better control the more aggressive impulses that it seems to be bringing out in him. There's a joke in this scene where Raven says that knowing when to let the beast out is what makes Beast Boy a man, and he says maybe they should call him Beast Man, which brings this all back around as sort of a metaphor for puberty, which I guess is cool. The episode needed a lesson. That can be their lesson. Don't let the changes within your body change who you are, or something along those lines. But I said at the top of this review that the most interesting thing about this episode is the things that are implied by it, and I'd like to take a second to talk about that a little bit. I've already gone on record saying that I don't think the logic in this episode really holds up, like, even in terms of the logic in this show, which isn't always stellar to begin with. But there is one thing that really doesn't make sense. In an episode where Raven literally teleported out of the grip of someone who was attacking her, I find it hard to believe that she wouldn't do so again when she bumped into a horrifying monster in the halls of her own house, if only to escape long enough to alert her friends that it was there. So I can't really believe that Adonis was there looking for Beast Boy. If he was, seeing how single-minded Beast Boy was in his Werebeast form, I wouldn't expect Adonis to even really notice Raven at first if he came upon her, since she wasn't his target. Which is why I think that she was. There is a reason why I played that clip earlier of Adonis creeping on Raven, aside from to establish that she was using her teleportation powers early in the episode, and to also joke about the show often forgetting her teleportation powers. I wanted to make it absolutely clear how Adonis was behaving towards Raven at the top of this episode. Adonis, like I said before, seems to be framed as a rich, entitled dude bro type And I think a lot of you guys can probably get what I'm implying here. At this point, I'm not going to explicitly say it, so if you don't get what I'm implying here, I apologize. Maybe somebody will say it in the comments. But I do think that Adonis came to the tower specifically for Raven, because he wanted something from Raven. And Beast Boy, I would imagine, acting on the animal instincts that were already bubbling up inside of him, was able to in some way sense Adonis's presence and go to Raven's defense, and that Raven just happened to grow conscious enough again during Beast Boy's initial attempt to fight and evade Adonis that she came to assume that Adonis was trying to get Beast Boy and not her. Like, I do think that the implication of this is there in the narrative. I'm just really curious at this point as to whether or not the writers realized what they were implying and included it for older viewers to pick up on and be like, oh shit. Or if it's legitimately something that made it in here without them realizing that it was in here. I'm also very curious to know if this werebeast thing has any basis in the comics. If it does, I don't know of it, but we do see it again in at least one other episode. I remember seeing it in like a big background fight or something in another episode at some point. So obviously Beast Boy can still call on it, and in certain circumstances does deem it necessary to do so, because he did fight against all of the Titans and did pretty freaking well. This thing's obviously very powerful, and it seems to get more powerful the longer Beast Boy uses it, and the more control he gets over it. So using it more often, practicing with it more often is only a good thing, but it does leave me wondering if this thing is from the comics. If it is, and one of you guys know, I'd really like you to let me know in the comment section down below. In fact, I'd like to know what you guys think of the Beast Within overall in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord, link in the description. Obviously, I don't like this episode all that much, except for the ending. But hey, maybe it has its defenders out there. Either way, though, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.